But you have to understand that when you are disseminating this information. So back to my main point, when you guys are applying for these contracts and grants and you say, I'm going to serve the community, have you evaluated those dynamics based on the population you're trying to serve? And it's not just in the health realm, anything, education, social services, etc. Have you identified the hindrances and the bottlenecks that exist within this community that's going to make your job a little bit more challenging that you are already planning around? We already know what to do because we know this is what exists and preeminates in this population. That is how you win a community impact contract or grant, specifically a connective service, referral service type contract or grant. That's going to be one of the biggest evaluation points. Welcome to the Contracts Collab podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Coach Ogo Okweme, and thank you so much for joining us in this thought-provoking podcast where we're going to break down the strategies that you can use to maximize your influence, your impact, and your income over the next 12 months. We are breaking down the strategies, the exact strategies that large corporations have used for years to impact their communities and build their revenue streams to the $1 billion mark. We're going to show you exactly how you can leverage contracts and grants from the government and other funding agencies to blow your business up, blow your impact up, not to mention maximize your income and revenue sources, and actually start to build something we like to call the infinite profit and wealth plan. So stay tuned, grab your notes, grab your pen, because you're going to want to write this down. Welcome. All right, you all. So today we're going to talk about some things that you really need to know if you have decided that you want to get into the community impact contracts and grants space. You have been watching me, you have been following me, you've been learning from me, and you've said within yourself, you know what? This is the route I want to go to. This is how I want to build a legacy for myself, for my family, and I want to use my skill sets and my expertise to do something greater than myself, to do something more impactful in my community. Today's episode is really going to capture you and really teach you some things. And you guys already know me. I'm the type of no fluff person where when I start talking, you want to grab a pen and paper. You want to take notes. You want to save. You want to come back and re-listen, because these are concepts that you're not going to find on Google. And I take pride in making sure that every ounce of knowledge that I give you, you can't find on Google. It's made and bred and built from experience and all the things that I have picked up on along the way, especially from my partners that are doing very, very well in this space. So now let's get started. I have my notes in front of me, so don't mind if I look down because I want to make sure I don't miss a thing. Okay? So today's going to be a good episode. So today we're talking about the different types of community impact contracts and grants that you can win, and the key strategies that you need to understand about each and every one of them, so that when you see these opportunities come up, you're able to really go after them tactfully, strategically, and position yourself to beat out your competitors. One thing that people don't realize, business is competition. We still love each other at the end of the day. We will still high five, hey girl, hey sis, hey bro. But at the end of the day, it's still competition. And when these agencies want to give out money to different business owners like yourself, how can you show them that you are worth that $50,000 investment, that $100,000 investment, that $200,000, $300,000, $1 million investment? It's about showcasing your value and that you're more valuable to them with your programs than your competitors are. So now let's get started. So the first type of community impact contract or grant that you're going to notice and you're going to see, and we'll talk about some of the key things you'll start to read and you'll start to sense that, okay, this is the type of contract this is what we like to call connective service contracts and grants. So connective service types of contracts or grants where what they're looking at is the flow of services to the community. How are we serving the lower income and more community members that have more disparities? How are we serving them with connections to services? How are we getting certain resources to them? How are they finding out that the government has certain programs available? And one of the hallmark programs that I can think about as I'm talking to you guys about this is the WIC program, Women, Infants, and Children program. Some of you may not know, some of you may know, and some of you may be so familiar with it because you already have experience working with them. But the Women and Infants and Children program was built to support lower income women, especially while they are pregnant and into the first 5 years of that child's life. The government needs to provide food for them, basic nutrition, access to diapers, wipes, those things that are basic necessities in that child's life, as well as routine checkups to make sure that that child is thriving, that that child is gaining weight, that that child is hitting specific markers. Because what the government understands, and this is what we all need to understand about working with the government and working with these funding agencies, and it doesn't just have to be domestically in the United States, it could be internationally as well. What they understand is there is no government without a thriving society. There is no one to rule, no one to create rules for, no one to pay taxes if you don't survive, if you don't actually thrive. And so even though we live in a capitalist society or a capitalist type society where everybody is working to gain something, to build their own wealth, to get their own way through life, the government and all governing bodies understand, even if you go down to kingdoms and queendoms, they understand that if my people aren't even alive, who am I ruling? Trees, sticks, chairs, empty houses? We need people. And there is a fundamental requirement to make sure that the basic necessities are provided to the people. Even in lower income countries who are still developing and still getting themselves together, they may not have everything figured out. They may not have their governing structures figured out. They may not have all of these things put in place the way we think they should be put in place. And I know because I'm an African immigrant. And more specifically, I am a Nigerian immigrant. I was not born in the United States. I immigrated here. And I've spent most of my life here. And I still have very strong roots and ties. Don't mind my accent. I've been here long enough for the accent to kind of digest. But that is my origin. And I understand that those countries that are still developing don't have some of these structures in place the way we think they need to have it in place. But no matter what, those government officials understand that if my people are not thriving, at least with some basic necessities, with some basic things, there is no people to rule. And so they may not be giving you everything you wish they could give you, but they were going to give you just enough so that you can actually thrive. You can survive. There will still be a society to rule. And whenever that is unbalanced, you will start to see them put new programs in place. When you start to see that certain communities are having higher disparity rates than others. We talk about it so much in the United States about, colored communities, communities of color, African American communities, of course, minority communities, Hispanic communities, Asian American communities, American Indian communities, despite what some people believe or what some people are teaching. American Indian communities are part of what we call the communities of color, who are having higher disparity rates, having higher issues with certain challenges, community challenges, etc. The government understands that if I don't provide at least access to quintessential services, and quintessential just means basic rights, basic things that we need to have as human beings to survive, there will be no people to govern. And it also makes them look very bad as a government. Remember, the government and all these big funding agencies, they're on stage. They're acting. They are putting on a show for the rest of the world. In order to maintain power, you need to look like you have power. You need to look like your people are intact. You need to look like you know what you're doing. High disparity rates, issues in the community, all these things, it does not make us look good. Trust and believe, the United States is paying attention. They are paying attention. They understand that on the global landscape, they have the highest maternal health mortality rates. That out of every other country on this globe, African American women are dying at significantly higher rates in the United States than anywhere else. Like, you don't see that happening in any other country. America understands that. The research studies are public knowledge. Governments in other countries are reading it. If you are a student where you had to do a lot of research, like me when I had to my undergrad and my grad degrees, yeah, I had to do a whole lot of research. When you go to the websites like Google Scholar, PubMed, JSTOR, etc., you're pulling articles and research that other people have done. But guess what? In other countries, they're pulling articles that we have done, because sometimes we set a benchmark. We set research studies that other countries now use to define policies in their own country, or they set policies and they do things in their country, and we then take those results and apply it to our country. So the information is so widespread. America knows. The world is watching, and they see what is happening to the American people. So when the government declares a priority, that maternal health is a priority, supporting women, infants, and children is a priority, making sure they have access to quintessential things. And this program was started during a period where a lot of women did not have the resources to take care of their children. And somebody should quote me, or someone should fact check me, but I think it started post-World War II era, World War II era, when a lot of men have gone out to war and women are left by themselves with their children to fend for themselves and to take care of themselves. And what a lot of people do not realize, when we say the children are the future, we're not joking. When the government says the children are the future, they're not joking. The next generation and the next 2 to 3 or 4 generations are going to be defined by how we take care of the current children. And it's not the children, not so much the children that are grade school level, like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, into the preteens. It's ages 1 through 5. That early childhood period defines a lot of what we see happening with children in their teenage years and their early adulthood years. So that period of 1 to 5 years old is so critical, and that's why they institute these programs. If you have ever heard of Head Start, home visiting programs, teachers as parents as teachers. These are all different evidence-based programs that the government institutes and pays a lot of money to run every single year, because they're targeting children between the ages of newborn to 5 years old. And Women, Infants, and Children WIC program is part of that group of programs instituted to support women while they're pregnant and after that child is born. So these are connective service type contracts where the government is putting you in position or asking you to come into position to become a facilitator of services for a particular population of people. You are connecting them to other service providers. You are doing assessments to make sure that they are getting appropriate services. You are helping them to navigate the complexity of all the services we offer. The challenge with having both state government and federal government is that they don't do things the same. State government wants to run the way state government wants to run, autonomy. Our whole Civil War was about autonomy of the state. And each state has its own level of sovereignty or its own level of independence. And so they can set rules the way they want to set rules. So then the federal government also sets its own rules. But because of sometimes there's a disconnect between those rules, it makes navigating resources and services overly complex for the public. So the government will then pay business owners like you to become those connectors, to become those facilitators, to become the entities that will now educate the public on what services exist and what they need to be taking advantage of based on what they need in their families. And usually these service providers, the government will always ask you to do some kind of needs assessment in the beginning. Determine what the need is. Don't just hand them a whole bunch of stuff because they may not need it. Determine what their need is. And when you look at these types of contracts, that's usually some of the required activities. What will the initial needs assessment be? How are you going to do this initial needs assessment? To determine what this family needs or to determine what this population needs. And then how are you going to connect them to the right referrals, to the right service providers? Have you built relationships with those service providers so that the flow between you and them is seamless? So when I tell people, when the government is reading your proposal and they're determining whether you were the right fit for this $100,000, $200,000, or $1 million contracts, and FYI, and I'm going to go back and fact check myself, but Home visiting programs, business owners who are given contracts for home visiting programs, those contracts are upwards of $1 million a year. That's a lot of money. But they also expect you to serve a certain amount of people. Okay? So these are the types of contracts that are asking you to do this. And when you read the requirements and they read your response, your proposal, because you're going to submit a proposal to this. When they read your response, they are looking for, did you meet our required activities? Did you do the needs assessment? Did you do the qualitative and quantitative assessments that they detailed? How are you tracking outcomes? How are you keeping track of the families that you are encountering? What types of baseline information are you collecting so that I know you actually serve those people? And that's what a lot of people don't realize, is that a lot of stuff that we actually learned in college and grad school, this is where you actually implement it. Look, when I say that I have struggled and I have wondered, why did I take so many classes in school to not apply them in real world? But then I became a business owner and I was like, oh, wait, come on. Let me pull these textbooks back out, because I'm now remembering that a lot of these things they're asking for are things that I learned while in school. The issue I have a lot with our education system is that direct flow, or realizing how you're going to apply it in the future, isn't always shown to us. So you kind of get into real life and you're like, what am I going to do with this information? And then you forget. But if we did better at showing that flow, and that's why we're actually starting our student development program, so that even students who are in undergrad and grad school can actually now start to see what they're learning in classroom applied in the real world. But I digress. But back to what I was saying. So when they're reading your proposal and they're evaluating it, they're going to look for, okay, did you meet our required activities? Then they're also going to ask, did you also account for activities that we're not necessarily going to tell you that are required, but you should know you have to get them done in order to actually fulfill what we ask? These are the unspoken requirements. I know you're an expert, or I assume you're an expert, so you should say this. And if you don't say it, I'm going to question your expertise. And the government's not doing that to kind of rule people out or, cancel people from being part of the contract and grants process. No, they're doing it because they need to level the playing field. They actually have to make it fair. If they spell out every single thing for you, then the question is, do you understand what you're doing? Because what a lot of people are going to do is they're going to literally, verbatim, regurgitate A, B, C, D, E, F, G that the government said. This is what I asked for. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now that might work in traditional contracts. Like if I'm hiring you to get me 1,000 pens for my office, or I'm hiring you to collect some trash for my buildings. It's pretty straightforward. There isn't much outside of A, B, C, D, E, F, G to do. In the community impact space, and this is why a lot of people that talk about government contracts and grants don't talk about community impact, is because community impact space actually requires that you come with some level of expertise, or you at least have someone working with you that comes with some level of expertise, that understands this terrain. You are dealing with the livelihood of other people. So then you need to showcase that you understand what it takes to improve the livelihood of other people. So I might say, okay, did you do the needs assessment? But you also need to tell me what is in that needs assessment. Why is this needs assessment more appropriate than that needs assessment for this particular population? Can you justify that for me? Can you explain that for me? And when you don't explain it, it's not like they're going to ding you. They're not going to take away points from your evaluation. They're not, because it's fair. You presented what I asked for. But the person that's going to rank higher than you is going to be the one that presented all of these things that they did not necessarily ask for, but they understand it's going to be a requirement in order to fulfill the requirements of this project and to do it effectively. So if you, for example, me and you score the same on what they ask, the basics of what they ask, I'm going to score higher than you because I'm going to also talk about the things that you didn't mention, but I know need to be done in order for this program to be effective and to actually make impact. And that, in the minds of the evaluator, is going to make me stand out. And I'm going to end up scoring higher than you. And it may not feel like a lot, 1 to 2 points, but when I tell you that I have lost contracts because of a point, 2 point, I have been told that, oh, your program was great. But when it came down to explaining why you chose certain processes, you didn't give us quite enough. You didn't give us as much as we thought you could give us. Or this was actually said to me. They said, when we compared what you gave us to those who applied, they gave us more. I'm laughing now, but I was livid at the time. I was livid. I was infuriated. I was angry. You mean to tell me that even though I met the requirements of everything you asked for, because I didn't go above and beyond like my competitors, I actually ended up losing? And that should tell you guys that when you're in this space to really make impact in the community, you cannot just give me the bare minimum. And that's what a lot of us are doing in business. We are giving the bare minimum. When I say the bare minimum, the bare minimum. We are giving the bare minimum and expecting people to pay top dollar. Stop it. Stop it. Even me with my programs, my classes, my clients, and all the things that I offer, when I say I'm a perfectionist, and I will throw out a program if I feel like we have not been meeting the needs of the people paying us, I will tell my team, I don't want to do this anymore because I can't serve them at my full capacity. It's going to make me be haphazard with this program. I wanted to say something else, but we online. Let's temper our language. I know. This episode is so juicy. It has so many good details, so many good strategies, and you don't want to take your eyes off or your ears. I know, but I wanted to drop in really quickly and tell you how you can maximize everything we're training you on, everything we're teaching you, everything we're exposing you. You need to join us in our next demo day. In Demo Day, that's where we break this down even more. We show you how to use these strategies live. Best of all, we expose you to the $1 billion contracts and collab community that we've been building that will give you access to contracts and grants at a 10 times higher level. You'll be able to maximize your ability to go out there and win those contracts and grants. Not to mention, you'll be able to partner with large corporations who want to do business with impact-driven business owners like you. So you want to join us in our next Demo Day? Click the link below or go to careerhaven.com and join us in our next Demo Day. See you there. But if I feel like I haven't given you my all, or what I just delivered was less than, I'm going to throw it out. I'm not going to want to submit it. I'm not going to want to give it to you, or I'm going to feel so bad that I'm not going to want to run the program anymore. That's just who I am. But then I realized that that type of mentality really thrives well in this environment, because when the government and these funding agencies evaluate your proposals, that's the type of level of dedication they're looking to see exude off that paper, lift off that paper. When they read your proposal, they should automatically know, man, this person is motivated. Man, this company really wants to do a good job. Man, they're really thinking outside the box. They're really considering all the needs that population has. The other thing I tell people, especially as you're applying, is don't be afraid to interweave your lived experience. It's not just about professional experience. There is a core facet of community impact that hedges itself in health equity and just equity in general. And a lot of people are paying attention to what's happening right now and how DEI is under attack, and people are not trying to be very vocal around diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you live in certain red states in the United States, there are red states and there are blue states. Red states are, some of your governors are gung-ho about tearing down a lot of these programs because there is this perception that DEI is divisive. But if you are a impact-driven business owner and someone who has a background in this space and someone who has been working in this space for a long time like I am, and you understand that there is no way to serve a population of people without first understanding the differences in their needs. African American populations are going to need things differently than would Asian American, than would Hispanic American, than would American Indian. We're going to differ in our needs. Our receptivity to the same services that you are trying to provide is going to differ. For example, I love to use this example because it just speaks volumes about the way we need to be looking at how do we impact communities. So if I am a diabetic patient, or I am pre-diabetes, or I have diabetes and I'm just newly diagnosed, the way you would talk to me if I were an African American has to be different from the way you talk to me if I am an African immigrant. Part of the problem and part of what the government is seeing is that we're talking to people the same way and getting different results. You can say the same thing to me as you would my Caucasian counterpart. And 5 years from now, our A1C levels are going to be drastically different. You tell a Caucasian woman or a Caucasian man, you have diabetes. You need to modify your lifestyle. You need to eat more fruits and vegetables. You need to reduce processed sugars. And you probably need to get on a diet because it's going to also help you reduce your weight because you are on the more obese side of the scale. That sounds one way to someone who's born and bred in America, who understands that language, who can process that at that level. But now you come to an African immigrant or an African American. Let me start with the African American because I've had conversations about this. It's a really big issue. That's just diabetes. There's so many other community challenges. You come to an African American, you say that exact same thing. It goes in one ear and out the other. We do want to listen, but here's what happens in our minds, especially if you're an African American woman. I'm big boned. I'm not obese, I'm big boned. My whole family is big boned. We got hips, we got thighs, we are round. That is how we are genetically disposed. It does not matter. If you give me fruits and vegetables, my hips are going to hit. Like them hips is going to show because our bodies metabolate differently. Therefore, you calling me obese actually feels like an insult. What do you mean? Everybody in my family is thick. And that's how we love our women. You're telling me I need to be skinny? That's not what my husband likes. That's not what my husband wants. That's not what got me my husband in the first place. Our culture loves thick women. My daughters are thick. I've been thick since I was 12. What do you mean I'm obese? Then that same woman goes home and talks to her mom and talks to her grandma and talks to her aunties. And they're like, don't listen to that doctor. They don't know what they're talking about. We big boned. Half that stuff they tell y'all, that's for the Caucasian folks. That ain't for us. So immediately, that information that just went in my ear, because it was portrayed to me as if I had the same level of understanding and disposition and cultural norms as a Caucasian person, my whole culture and family norms and perceptions have completely dismissed all of that advice. So guess what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to modify my lifestyle because now I think my doctors are lying. Now I think you're just trying to tell me things because you want me to be skinny like somebody else. And that's not possible in my family. You're just trying to make me feel bad about being thick. But that's how our people are. And now you see that it's now becoming a self-esteem issue. It's becoming a cultural tension issue. All we wanted to do in the beginning was just tell you that, hey, based on your A1C levels and your blood sugar levels, you are diabetic. You're tending towards diabetic levels. And we want to catch that early. We want to reduce that. We want to enroll you into a program because that's what the government wants. We want to catch diabetes early enough so that it can be reversed. And you get enrolled into a program. We reduce those A1C levels. We get you to a space where you can be healthy long term and you don't experience all those complications that will end you up in the hospital 5-10 years from now, because the government knows once you end up in the hospital for these complications, it's more money out of their pockets, more tax dollars out of their pockets. And I'd rather save my tax dollars by giving you programs earlier on, preventative. But because you fail to realize that that language that you're painting does not feed me as an African American, it does not mean anything to me. And even if I try to listen to you, my cultural norms and my community dynamics is going to dismiss it immediately. I remember as a child, let me be honest with y'all, I don't look that big. I'm still trying to slim down, I'm still technically in what they call the postpartum phase. I think you're still in postpartum, I think 2 to 3 years after you have a child. So my daughter is 2. So I'm still kind of technically in the postpartum phase. And it's now that I'm starting to feel like, okay, I'm coming back to myself. I'm kind of feeling like myself again. I'm kind of feeling like I'm in my body again. But if you tell these things to a culture and a population where they can't receive it the way you are dishing it out, then it's not effective. That is equity. It's not about black being better than white or colored versus non-colored. Like, it's not that. It's just, do you understand how best to communicate? It's basic communication. Equitable communication. Do you understand how to communicate so that what you're dishing out and what you're giving the public can be well received and well utilized? So when you guys are applying for these programs, that's what the government is assessing. So back to my example, that was just general knowledge to a Caucasian person versus an African American. Now let's talk about African immigrants, not African Americans. They're African immigrants, and they are very, very clear about they are African immigrants. And we can have another conversation about how census data groups us all into black instead of actually qualifying the levels of blackness. African American, African immigrant, first gen African. Our dynamics are different. The way we see life is different, but that's neither here nor there. We can talk about that later. But now if you talk about an African immigrant mother, at that, mother, you tell her she obese, she gonna look at you like you crazy. Me, obese. Doctor, you lost your mind. Literally. And my mom is the same way. My mom is the same way, because when they told me I was on the obese side, mind you, I was, what was I, 12? I was 120 pounds, something like that. 120 pounds at 12 or 13. My mother was like, you're mad. You don't know what you're talking about. Literally. Insulted the doctor while we there. And while we in the car, she's like, what did they know? Like, in her African mom demeanor. And I was like, go mom. But it made me question whether doctors were lying to me because I'm an African child. It made me question a lot of the recommendations around reducing your weight. But if you look at me in the mirror, I don't look big. I don't look big. And that's where these terms and how we use these terms create friction in society. And that in turn makes the advice not usable anymore. People aren't listening anymore. And the government knows that. The government understands that. And that's why they're positioning business owners like you, who can now go to these communities, because you not only understand the science and what needs to be done, you also understand the dynamics of the population. So now you can tell an African mom that it's not about obesity or you being obese. Is that inside your body, that fufu, that akpu, those carbohydrates are raising your blood sugar levels. And in order to keep them down so that you don't have the complications of diabetic retinopathy, glaucoma, nerve damage, etc., wounds that won't heal. If you want to prevent that, Reduce your apple, reduce your rice. Rice is such a staple in the African culture, and that is usually the source of most of our sugar. Rice. It's not candy. I've had some people say, oh, don't eat as much candy, don't eat as much bread, don't eat as much processed foods. And it's like, what's that? Who eats that in my house? Nobody eats that. And so it's like, no, you need to understand what they actually eat. What they're eating are high dense carbohydrates in the form of rice, pounded yam, cassava, the things that are so dense but is such a staple in their diet. It's almost hard for them to release the hold of sugar. But you have to understand that when you are disseminating this information. So back to my main point, when you guys are applying for these contracts and grants and you say, I'm going to serve the community, have you evaluated those dynamics based on the population you're trying to serve? And it's not just in the health realm, anything, education, social services, etc. Have you identified the hindrances and the bottlenecks that exist within this community that's going to make your job a little bit more challenging that you are already planning around? We already know what to do because we know this is what exists and preeminates in this population. That is how you win a community impact contract or grant, specifically a connective service, referral service type contract or grant. That's going to be one of the biggest evaluation points. That is going to be one of the biggest evaluation points. And we spent a whole lot of time on just one. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 different types. And we just went over one. So I guess this is going to be part 1 of a series of talks about different types of programs. But connective service contracts, I love them because it doesn't require you to be a hardcore clinician or have all these high degrees. It doesn't require any of that. It requires an understanding of the flow of services. How do we go from here to here to here? How would you refer a person who is lower income, who needs support with employment, who needs support with housing, who needs support with healthcare? Those are their 3 needs. So how do you as an organization help connect them to those services? What's going to be your process based on what the government has asked you to do in that document? And for those of you that don't know, that document is called a solicitation. When the government has a program that they want to fund, 100,000, 200,000, $1 million, they put it in the form of a solicitation. And that solicitation is then posted online. Every state has their procurement website where they post these opportunities. Every locality, every township, every federal agency. And then they also have uniform platforms where most agencies are now connecting to, but each agency also has their individual website. There are a lot of them. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of them, and I can list off so many of them in one of the videos. We'll just go through some of them so that you're familiar with where to find these opportunities. But then you also have to think about philanthropic opportunities, foundational opportunities, opportunities that are linked to corporations who also want to do community impact. I went out to lunch with Care First Blue Cross, one of their directors, the other day. And she's like, yeah, Olga, we give out millions of dollars a year to business organizations that are centered around community impact. Even though we're a corporation, we know that if we want to improve things for our members in the communities our members live in, we have to fund these programs because they can do what we can't do. We're too busy on the corporate level. So we fund smaller companies to do this work on the community lens. So there is a lot of opportunity. There is layers of opportunity. You all need to tap in, especially if you say that my goal is to impact my community. My goal is to transform the lives of other people. My goal is to make things better for the people that look like me and the people that live around me. If you have ever, and I will always tell you guys this work is not just a matter of wealth building. And I used to, in the beginning, I used to talk about this as we need to do more of this work so we can build wealth. We can build a legacy, etc. It's not just about the money. The money will come. It is about ministry. I'll be honest with you. This is a ministry. This is a ministry. This is how I believe God has asked us to serve others. When he said, when you have served your neighbor, you have served me, I take that very seriously. And it's not just, in a smaller sense or in a smaller scale. Yeah, it's me lending to my neighbor. It's me supporting my neighbor with their child. It's me being there for that person that's right beside me. It's me realizing that one of my friends is suffering. Let me help them out. That's service to others. But my God, and I'm sure many of you also believe this, my God is not a small God. He didn't call me for small things. He didn't say do things on a small scale. No, he called me to exponential exploits. Like I'm telling it to you the way I read it out my Bible. He called me to exponential exploits, and he's calling y'all to exponential exploits as well. You may not know it. You may not believe in God right now, but you hang out with me long enough, trust and believe you will, because a lot of the things that you're going to realize and you're going to experience as you're doing this work is that it is at its core ministry. And do it right, it will position you to exponentially have a ripple effect in people's lives around you, locally, statewide, nationally, and globally. This channel, this path, I believe fundamentally we are called to utilize this path to serve people on a grander scale. I've met people who have nonprofits who tell me, Ogo, I just want to help people, the lesser people, I don't want to say lesser people, the less fortunate, there we go, that's the term I'm looking for, the less fortunate, who don't have as much as me. I'm so grateful for where God has put me. I'm so grateful for all the things that God has positioned me to have, but I want to give back. I want to do more for others. And what you end up doing is now taking money out of your paycheck, out of your savings to serve other people. That's cool. Don't get me wrong. I've done it as well. And maybe one of these days I'll talk about when I gave out like over 4,000 school supplies in Nigeria. That was one of the most memorable experiences of my life. And it's like, I can't wait to do it again. Honestly, I cannot wait to do it again. But that can only be done for so long. How do you sustain that? How do you sustain that if you don't actually think about strategically, what am I doing? I want to serve, but how do I serve on a grander scale? How do I serve in a way that actually has a ripple effect? How do I serve that fulfills ministry and provides monetary gain? It's service. And if you always start from that heart posture and from that position, the opportunities will unveil themselves to you. You will start to realize that, man, I can do this. Some of you are watching me and you're going to keep watching me because you need to build your confidence. I'm here to tell you, you can do this. You can do this. One of my first contracts was a multi-six-figure contract for mental health services. I have no degrees in mental health. And one of my friends who is a therapist will tell you, I sat down with him after winning that contract, like, all right, tell me how we're going to do this. Because having that knowledge is not a requirement for getting the contract. What is a requirement is understanding how to put your teams together and how to put the people together who can help you get it done. That's why when I tell some of you guys this loner mentality, this I'm going to do it myself mentality, it's not going to get you far. It's not going to get you far at all. You're not going to be able to scale your business the way you want to scale it. You may be winning a little bit right now, or you may be making a little bit of money right now, or maybe you're not making anything. Most of your income is still coming from that professional job. But if you want to get to the space that you know you're called to, you're going to have to learn how to leverage all of the things we talk about and leveraging the way this community is built and all the knowledge that we have to lend you. Because that's our ministry, bringing us together to have collective impact. So I hope this episode was helpful for you. We'll definitely continue with part two. Let me give you a little sneak peek. Part two, we're going to talk about implementation contracts and grants and how those contracts work. So you better stay tuned for the next episode, implementation contracts and grants. Those ones are one of my favorites, and you're going to love them when I break them down for you. All right, you guys, I'll see you in the next episode. Wow. Wow. That episode was amazing. Those strategies were amazing. When I tell you that every day we get together as a team and we think about what can we teach you, what can we expose you to so that your businesses can thrive, you can exponentially grow the way we know God wants you to grow. And even if you don't believe in God, that's okay. You still deserve to grow exponentially. And that is why we bring you these episodes every single week. But you don't have to stop there. You need to join us in our next demo day. In Demo Day, we break this down even more. We show you how to go from government contract and grant to an infinite profit path. We show you how to take those same opportunities and maximize your revenue streams. We show you how to leverage the influence and resources of large corporations and other experts in diverse disciplines so that you can go after these opportunities and have a higher win rate. And not only winning the contracts and grants, but making even more revenue on the back end and the front end. So join us in our next Demo Day. Click the link below and we'll see you there.